Hello, you're listening to Overwhelm is Optional.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Overwhelm is Optional podcast. I'm really excited and honoured to have Curtis Knapton with me this week. I have no idea how to introduce Curtis because he just does so many really interesting things, and we could talk for hours about all sorts of things, from whatever an Ice Warrior team member is to his idea about bettering mankind. Apparently he's even an astronaut in the making. We definitely connected over wanting to make the world a better place, and we talked a lot previously about, not on air, lots of the conversation goes on before podcasts. We talked a lot about sustainable energy, which we're both really passionate about. But I love this idea of ordinary people doing the extraordinary, especially when we get together. And that's what I really like about inviting people onto the podcast, is we can talk about helpful things that help you. So this is somebody who's doing extraordinary things, and yet he's still going to talk to you about his adventures in Overwhelm, which I think is really important, because we can often feel like there's something wrong with us and the extraordinary people never get overwhelmed, or that they somehow were born doing extraordinary things and never have to grow or do anything. So I think it's going to be really interesting, but also, I hope, really empowering and inspiring conversation today. I particularly want to talk to Curtis about his latest adventure, which is called Growing Heroes, which is to help people, supporting them with homeschooling. So we're also going to hear about that. But anyway, welcome, Curtis. It's so lovely to have you here.
Hey, Heidi. Thank you for having me. Appreciate being on the Overwhelm is Optional podcast. This is fantastic. Looking forward to it.
Thank you. So let's start with, tell me about your adventures in Overwhelm.
Is it podcast long enough?
I'm not. Have I recorded? Yes, I have. Sorry, carry on. Muppet me. I'll edit that bit out.
No, leave it in there.
Leave it in there. Yeah, let's leave it in there. It's funny. Sorry, go on.
Adventures in Overwhelm. I mean, looking back, if I was to look back on life, I mean, it starts from a young age, I guess. I was always a sheep. If we're talking of, say, from school age, so say like early school, high school and all that, so I was always a sheep. I was quite worried about standing out. Just followed the crowd, getting up to no good, not doing great things. I was quite academic when I put my mind to it, but it was like I didn't want to stand out by overachieving, so I just sort of kept myself to myself and just followed what everyone else was doing. Really, I could have overachieved and could have done, I don't know what I could have done, but so I definitely was overwhelmed to try and stand out when I was at school, for sure. So even it got to a point where just talking in any size crowd was really daunting for me. Even a one-to-one conversation like we're having now was like, it was nuts. It was just so overwhelming, and the pressure to try and fit in, it was just crazy. And that lasted for most of my teens, I reckon. I probably hit it quite well, getting drunk with the lads and doing all that sort of stuff. So everything was all about sort of suppression, I guess, and sort of masking that side of me, just being another face in the crowd that done what everyone else was doing. So no one would ever know from the surface any sort of overwhelming feelings that were going on underneath. But
I'm actually so glad you said that, because I think this is a common misconception. I think we look at, it's easy to get into comparison, compare ourselves to other people. A lot of the people I work with compare themselves to other people and think they don't struggle with any of this normal human stuff. So
it's not talked about. So how would you know that other people are going through it? It's the whole, it's just what I love, is the idea of this podcast and what it's doing. It's actually talking about real stuff. Okay, you got some really fantastic guests that have looked in the past. So I'm really glad that I'm on it. I'm happy that you chose me, which is fantastic to be a part of that list. But they've all gone through the same stuff, that they may have done something great now, but don't put them on a pedestal. They've all had a backstory. They all started right where we are. We all started. We're all the same, basically, is what I'm getting at. It's just you choose to be a bit different if you want.
Yeah, choosing to be extraordinary. But it's really interesting hearing you say that you were trying to blend in. And I really recognise that kind of, for me, if I look back, it's quite physical, that crushing yourself down to make yourself small and playing small, which is why I'm all about getting into the body, because once you get into the body, you literally see people open up and then they find this gentle inner confidence and then they can suddenly speak and it's not so scary. And so I love that description of, because when we look at you now, we would never think that you would say what you've just said about your younger years and really struggling to be able to speak in a crowd. I mean, that to me doesn't make any sense, seeing what
I speak in front of lots of people now about various different things and quite exciting and engaging. And I still feel it inside, but I've done some different types of training and talking to myself about going back to that younger version of me and all that stuff. And it's still there, but I've just learned how to use the energy from it, I guess. Try not to suppress it so much because it's a powerful thing, but try and use it somehow and put it to some good use.
I like that you said that about not suppressing it, because I know we briefly mentioned when we first connected about state changing, and I said I'm not a fan of state changing as the first thing, because you lose. I mean, there's times when it's really beneficial, but when we suppress, where we don't meet ourselves where we are, we miss out, as you say, on using the energy of that, and also we're going back to that like disconnection from ourselves, which disconnects us from others, because by saying, yeah, actually I feel quite overwhelmed in a conversation, or I feel quite overwhelmed in a crowd, and then daring to say that, connecting to that pain or that feeling, it's powerful. It breaks through barriers with other people as soon as we're willing to be seen. And it's part of that journey of self-acceptance. And I think there's a lot of missing out. I hear so much about just change your mindset, just do these positive affirmations, just be like me. And it's like, no, you can't just do that stuff. This is deep work.
It really is. Really is. You could just walk up to a bear and say, stop being so much like a bear. It just doesn't work, does it? If we're still staying on that same subject, there's
go for it.
Like, I love going back. It brings back loads of memories and feelings. I suppose, like a lot of these situations, perhaps parents played a big part. I had a lack of a dad. And so for a long time, I was always searching for appraisal from other father-like figures. So I was always, if I wasn't being introverted, sometimes I'd be over extroverted in front of these people to try and get their praise. And they would be like my friends' dads, or I had a long-term girlfriend and her dad, sorry. And he was like a manly man. So that kind of taught me a few things of like, okay, perhaps I should change a little bit, be a bit more manly and all that sort of stuff, bravado, and didn't really work for me. But like the idea of trying to live up to someone else, I can definitely resonate with that, because that was me. I was either fitting in or trying to live up to someone else's expectations as a child. So yeah, I think that wraps it up for that part. Or do you want to keep going with that? I mean, it's
entirely up to you. People have. I always think that the stories, I think telling our stories interesting and really important, but I always honour this idea that you don't need to be so vulnerable that you feel unsafe. To me, it's about which part of my story today is something that I wish to give the world. That's all I ever see it as. So tell me, that's why the question's playful. Tell me about your adventures in Overwhelm, because an adventure is that hero's journey, isn't it? Is that going down and finding something that we're willing to share, that we're comfortable sharing, that's a little bit uncomfortable, because we're not painting ourselves as always being brilliant. We're going back and and digging into something, but it's something that we've come to terms with. It's something that, like you said, you're using the energy of. So for me, it's about whatever comes to mind when I ask you that question, whatever makes you go, oh yeah, I remember that, and kind of connects you to something that you're bringing forward now into who you are, how you are in the world. Now, what's really interesting to me is you're obviously really passionate and driven.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that I know for me and for everybody else that I've interviewed and for the other entrepreneurs that we know, that tends to come, like you say, from something in childhood, not necessarily trauma or damage, but just something that doesn't seem to come from nowhere. Because to do all of these things, these adventures now, this wanting the world to be better, this, we've sacrificed the comfort of, playing small. And that's not to disregard people who are in that situation. We all have our own journeys. And I remember somebody 2 weeks ago said, Heidi, why are you playing small? I'm like, I'm playing big, so the idea of playing small and big is a bit of a nonsense because it's all relative to where it is for you. But I guess I'm really interested in why. How did you end up on these adventures now? Because you've got a ridiculous amount of ventures going on.
Okay, so there was a catalyst moment for me. Absolutely, that behaviour of a past version of myself carried on well into my teens, and it wasn't until I was 21 when I met my now wife that probably the real catalyst moment really happened. There were some little bits of change before. Story being, like, I've been a builder my whole life, and like we go to the cafe in the morning, like usual typical tradesmen do, and everyone get a fry up and all that stuff, and I'd sit there with a baked potato and some prawns, and that was probably like in my early 20s. So like straight, like from then I could sense that I was being a bit different, and I was just putting myself out there. But definitely the catalyst moment was meeting my wife. She was my hairdresser, and as soon as I took a liking to her, all of a sudden I went from getting a haircut every month or so to pretty much every week. Much growth had happened in the
I was going to say,
week,
did you have any hair?
but I was in there getting my hair cut, always her. Kate, her name is. And that's how it started. And me being a bit of a lad then, I started talking to her, finding out what she's into. She said yoga. And I was like, oh, I want to get into yoga. I had no interest in getting into yoga. I was a typical lad builder. I didn't even know what it was. I thought it was like put leotards on and put your legs over your head. It's really not, but that was my perception back then. And it just went from there. We started seeing each other. I found out that in my eyes, where I'd been in my comfort zone and just stayed in my local area doing the normal stuff, well, she had traveled the world. She'd worked all over the world. She had a couple of businesses. In my eyes, she had seen, been and done everything. And that really opened my eyes. And it kind of opened up a Pandora's box, really, because now it's insatiable. It's become a bit of an obsession. And I don't see the word obsession as a bad thing. I know it's got a bit of a negative sort of, I don't know, aura around it, but it is become an obsession of learning is what it's become, mentally, physically. I just absolutely love to learn new things, but also improve on old things. It's become quite insatiable, really.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, that's really exciting. There are those pivotal moments, aren't there, where somebody makes our world bigger, and suddenly the world that we once saw doesn't exist. It's like somebody changed the shape of the moon, and I love that. I actually took my kids out of school for 3 months when they were 13 and 11 to backpack around the world, and that's because I wanted to make their world a bit bigger.
Yeah.
And because to me that was really important, and I can't even remember my own moment when I realized the world was a bit bigger. That's kind of, I don't know if there was one particular one, but it was really important to me that they understood that there was more out there, that I just wanted them to see the world a bit differently. Yeah. And I think as a parent that's quite difficult, because however you raise your children, they're just familiar with that. Mm-hmm. So I guess for me, taking them out of school, going around the world, that was a big catalyst. I don't know if it worked. I'm not sure. I'll have to ask them again now they're older.
A truly epic thing to do. I've got 2 young girls, and doing something like that would be amazing. If my mum did that, thinking about it now, if I was to think about it now and she did that, would be like, oh my gosh, that would be a really big thing. So I reckon you've done something pretty awesome there.
Yeah, I don't know. I've been thinking about it recently because I found a box, and it said 82 days around the world, 2003 to 2004. And I looked up, and on the 7th of January, which is when I posted about it, we were just getting on the magic bus in the South Island of New Zealand. But there's pictures in there when you look at the kids and they're just exactly the same as they would have been at home. You know, they've got that kind of either grumpy, bored look, even though they're standing outside some beautiful gold Buddha in Thailand. You know, they just like miss it because it became normal. And that's quite interesting, isn't it? That we very quickly kind of adjust, and that the extraordinary can become ordinary, which is why I'm really interested to know more about this obsessive thing of learning, because I think that it's that, isn't it? It's that wanting. I think, but I have to qualify this because I do have an issue with constant self-improvement because we feel there's something wrong with us, as opposed to obsession with learning because we're excited, and that's a heart-opening and expansive thing.
There's nothing wrong with me if you're worried for my mental health. Absolutely.
No, I don't think there's
myself
anything
too much. So it's kind of the opposite. It's like I'm excited to see what I can do, basically.
Yeah.
Or what we can do is kind of more the narrative. It started off so if we go back a little bit to say that catalyst moment, kind of a second catalyst moment, really, because I said it kind of happened a little bit before. So a little bit before, my mum was diagnosed with cancer. So that was the big C word, and I had a death in the family already. So that was like up in the air and always in the back of my mind. So that happened. And then 2 or 3 years later, I met Kate, and then like this big catalyst happened. So from meeting Kate, seeing someone that had, in my eyes, been seen and done everything around the world to my mum, in my back of my mind is like, okay, cool. So life's quite short, or can be quite short.
Yeah.
The world's actually quite a lot bigger than this little town that I live in. Okay, what can we do with this? Yeah. And it started off with probably fitness, I reckon. Started to look after myself, not eat bad food and drink and all that stuff. And I used to smoke that back then as well. Started to look after myself, started to feel better. Okay, cool. So I feel better now. What can I do? Start doing some running. Okay, what do you do when you run? Do you just run around the block? Where does it go? I want to see like progression. Start wanting to see progression now. I was okay. So races, I guess. Didn't know what was going on, so I signed up to some local races, and then they turned into bigger races, and I started getting into a thing called obstacle course racing. So then I started really hitting that hard. At one point, I was probably doing 2 of them a month, and they're all over the country. The ones I went to, they're all over the world, but I was just literally taking the family, traveling around, racing, part of the whole scene, because once you sort of get into any sport like that, it's kind of the same people. Wherever you go, it's kind of a similar sort of crowd. So you just start to make friends, and your network just grows that little bit more. And it was a little bit egotistical, I guess, because it was about, at the time, it was about me and what I could do physically, mentally. I did start getting into yoga eventually, about 2 years after I met Kate. So it took me a while, but I did start getting into it because I see the benefit of it. Mentally, it's a bit meditative, but physically for me at the time, I was training a lot. So it just meant that I could run that little bit faster. I could go a little bit more because it cut my recovery time in half. And sticking with that sort of egotistical mindset, which I had at the time, I started doing other stuff. I love my motorbikes. I like skydiving. But my reason for doing it was a little bit egotistical, that, look at me, I can do some cool stuff. How far can I go? But also when I started with the yoga, going back to it being a bit meditative, I started doing the meditations as well. In the mornings I do meditation and yoga. And I was thinking, this is great. It took me a while to get into it. But when I got into that state of sort of single focus, it's hard for me to stay in it, but I loved it. So then I was thinking to myself, okay, what else can I do to get into that single sort of thought state? And that's when I started doing like the motorbikes and the skydiving and things, because it sounds really corny, but when you are close to what's perceived as death, when you're going really fast, all this sort of stuff, you cannot think of anything else other than what you're doing.
Yeah.
And it sounds weird, but it's almost like meditating for me. It is a meditative sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was chasing that. I was chasing the excitement of trying new things, but also that single focus, which I loved. don't know if you want to expand on any of that, but that's I just started doing all weird and wonderful things like triathlons and all sorts of sports things. And
I do find that really interesting, because there's different sorts of meditation. So that yogic meditation where you go single focus and you're really trying to calm the mind is actually the opposite of what I now teach. But I just want to go back to what you said about the motorbikes and skydiving, because one of the things I think we long for as humans is to get that silence in our mind. Mm-hmm. And that can lead us to extreme things, which aren't always healthy. But there is always, and so to me, but it can be healthy. So it's not really about the what, it's about how much you are valuing yourself and whether you're actually putting yourself in danger or you're just having fun. And it's just, I think it's important to recognize that. So, I mean, the first thing that came to mind for me personally was I used to windsurf. And when I was windsurfing, it was very meditative, because it was just me and the wind and the sea. And you're having to react all the time to any change in the wind. So you just become, until I got thrown off again, I was never brilliant. But that bit where you're planing and you can just hear this chicka, 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 chicka. And it's just such a dance, because it's your whole body is involved in windsurfing, isn't it? Because if you slightly step one way, you get thrown off. So that came to mind for me, that lovely, you cannot think. You are completely one with the board and the wind. And so that's really meditative. And then I think of running. So a lot of people run, right? Mm-hmm. And some people run, and I've had experience with this with the people I work with who are runners, which has been really interesting. So some people run in order to try and run away from their day. Yeah. So you come home, you're going to run really hard and fast to try and wash the day away. Mm-hmm. So we're looking for that single purpose, that single focus, that clearing of the mind. And then we started to, but that's not what I teach. What I teach is the Zen version, which is where you just notice the busyness of the mind and you don't try and control it or stop it. You just notice it. Mm-hmm. And so I teach something called neutral noticing, which are very, very short practices of getting out of the head into the body and noticing completely neutrally. So meeting yourself where you are. And what was really interesting is, I don't run now because it's just not something I want to do. I do run, like I'm in the woods and the dogs start running and I'm like running and laughing, but I don't go for runs because that's not what my body wants to do. And I do other things. But I've tested this out with current people I work with, and they've had some really interesting results. So they've gone from that hard running, like, oh, this is really hard work, but I'll feel better eventually. It's good for me, but I hate it. My body hurts, or, that resistance we have to exercise, but it's kind of worth it afterwards, to doing the neutral noticing practice while they're running. So they're really feeling their feet on the ground. They're really feeling the strength and power of their body. They're really feeling the joy of being able to just think with your mind and move. I mean, how magical is that we can direct our physical body by thinking? I mean, it's weird, right? But we don't think about this stuff. So then it started to become more of a magical celebration of having a body. And then it completely changed their experience of running. And I love this because if they've gone from kind of like, I need to run because I'll feel better and I need to let go of the stress of the day, and there's nothing wrong with that, to being in the body, feeling the feet on the ground, and their running became easier. And that was really interesting to me, because so many people damage themselves running. Mm-hmm. So many, I did as well. I did a half marathon and wrecked my body because I overtrained and ran it anyway, because you're going to, right? You've spent 6 months training. Stupid. Never do that. Body's too important. But yeah, this is quite interesting to me, this trying to control the busyness of our mind because it's painful, that overwhelmed human mind. And I just go completely the other way with, right, there's nothing you can do about that. Well, you can do that single focus technique you're talking about, but that's not what I teach. Mm-hmm. And I really love this idea that instead, because it's easier, we can just watch it, like that's what our minds do. But we can be a bit playful and go, yeah, you're a bit grumpy, mind, or you're a bit naggy, you're a bit doomy. I'm just not going to pay attention to you. I'm going to really feel my feet on the ground, and I'm really going to feel what it's like to have a body and just how magical it is. And I find that more joyful. I just find it easier and more playful, and it's faster because you don't have to put your shoes on or you don't have to jump out of a plane. You can quite literally just do it right now, dropping your attention. So yeah, it's really interesting. So now I'm thinking, oh, does that mean we're getting results without jumping out of planes? Because that's quite cool.
That's awesome. That's a great transition for anyone that's gone from that single looking to get away from life, as it were, to not having to get away from life. I have a slight different opinion on it. I kind of run to get into life, and I don't know if it's different or the same.
Go on, describe your experience of running. I love this.
Well, it's like my morning routine. I try to stick to it. It's never like perfect, but on a great day, it would be wake up, do some yoga, read a bit of a book that I'm into at the moment, go and exercise, and come back and eat breakfast. And it's kind of it's how I start my day. It's how if I do that in the morning, the rest of my day is great. Yeah. And I try. And that's the result of it. I try not to think of it. It has to go in the order, because I've done it in the past where if I don't do it, I get really peed off myself that I didn't do it and frustrated. So now I try not to sort of beat myself up for it. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. I was meant to do something else. That's fine.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I've actually just recorded this morning a podcast episode on why you should create your own routine and be like flexible in the moment with it, rather than copying somebody else's or getting really rigid. Or so that's really interesting, because that's what I've been really immersed in this morning creatively. So you still, so it sounds like you were more stuck in that, having to do it. So where are you with it now?
I really enjoy it. Honestly, I really do. And my training now consists of running, swimming, cycling. So
triathlon.
Yeah, so every day I'm doing something different, and swimming at the moment was my weakest of the three, and I've just been doing a lot of outside swimming in the cold, and that's become really meditative and not in a single focus, but like how you talked about the Zen Buddhist way, where I'm under the water and I feel like, and I don't know how it's going to sound, but like I'm kind of one with the water.
Yeah,
like my ears are under. My face is under, and I don't think about breathing. Everything just goes into sort of
slow,
automatic, slow mode, and I'm just like, it's the mind just almost becomes the water, if that makes sense. And it's just like this great big expanse of water. You're in it, and any thought just comes and goes, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't stop me. It's just, and my body's in automatic mode. I'm just going for it, and it's great. I love it. Absolutely love it.
That's amazing.
I don't find it in the pool because I guess it's that erratic up and down. You kind of get it in the middle for a little bit. When you go like open water swimming, great big lengths of big bodies of water.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Really love it.
That's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow. What about the running? Go back to the running, your experience of that. You said you run to get into life.
Yeah, I mean, it's a similar process, especially this time of year, because I get up quite early. I'm up at 4:30, and I generally go running not too soon after I wake up, so it's dark. And that's a bit similar to the water, where it's dark. You can't see further than your feet and all that stuff. So you feel like you're part of the darkness. So then that expanse.
Yeah.
The thought process is what did I do yesterday, and all this sort of thought processes and stuff is going on, but I'm just, doesn't matter that it's coming and going. I don't know.
So you're able to like watch and observe the parts of your thought processes, but be in this darkness and in your body. Is that?
It's very visual. I'm very quite imaginative, so I can see like shapes and visions of what I want to do today, for instance, or if I was, or anything like that, or just spend time with a family. Anything to sort of think about, I think about, and kind of materialize it. You know, like in a manifest. I'm thinking about what I want to happen, and it happens. In this darkness, things are just coming and going, manifesting what I want to do that year, and that's what I mean by running into life. Life as I'm running, I'm not running away from it. I'm kind of thinking to do and running towards that.
Yeah,
things just happen. Like it took me. If you're going to go on a vacation, heard about it, didn't think much of it. Then I started taking it a bit serious. Things started happening more than could be sort of coincidence.
Oh, go on, give
It
us
was
an
like,
example.
okay, what would be an example? There's so many. What would be one? At the time, I remember one time I was, like the letters come through. I think, oh, blimey, there's another bill there. Oh, blimey, there's another bill
breaking
there.
up slightly. Hang on. I think you're back.
Me?
Yeah, I think so.
Are there?
Yep.
So yeah, letters come through the door.
Yeah.
Oh, is it a bill? Yeah, it's a bill. Okay. Blimey, not another bill. Like, I'm thinking it's a bill before it happened. Then I changed my thought to, no, I want some money in there. Okay. So the next wasn't money there, but the thought was, oh, great, there's money. I just was like, oh, this is great. There's going to be money in this one. And I kid you not, a week and a half later, there was a letter come through and the same thought process. Oh, great, there's money in there. And it wasn't planned. It wasn't like I could link it. I'd done a while ago. It was I rent, which I had no idea about. You've overpaid, so here's your money. There's about 1,500 quid. And I was like, that was just like, that just happened. And loads of like parking spaces or seeing certain things in the day. If I want to see, like, I don't know, like a different colour feather or something, if I thought about it long enough, I'd see. So I don't know too often now. I suppose it's hard to. You said earlier about astronaut. That was one of them.
Go on, tell me more about the astronaut.
Yeah, I just, as a kid, wanted to be an astronaut, I think like most do. And now I'm in my 30s and just I thought, actually, perhaps it could happen. And I became a fireman for a little while, went through the rigmarole of doing that and loved the training of it. I fortunately met a guy called Jim McNeil and that was it. I kept hearing things like Arctic Bear, World First, Expedition, all these sort of like key words. But I just went over there and said, look, excuse me, mate, how on earth, whatever you're talking about? And that was the start of it, really. A company, Fort Bale, he's a famous polar explorer, 35 years now, 36 years. But basically, he set up Ice Warrior to ordinary people to do extra things. And he's taken over 50 people now on expeditions to the polar regions. And the expedition that I've been training for is a world first. It's the whole scientific is to try and understand what a sea ice is the past. But the world where we end up, the pole of inaccessible of the Arctic Ocean, the world first part. And I'm no scientist by any stretch of the imagination. When we go there, we're taking very basic samples like depth of the sea ice, temperature, plastic in the ocean, really, really basic stuff, but very fortunate that we've got the world's best scientists around us. So the big boys in the Met Office, NASA, NSIDC, all these big names in climate change, we're able to give them the very raw data and they do the magic. They're the guys that work.
When is this happening?
So it's been put off for the past few years due to things, either sponsorship, a lot of it is sponsorship, COVID, we can get enough training. So it's always mid-February. So now it's pushed back to next mid-February. Yeah. So the team's trained, ready to go. And throughout the year, we train a lot in Dartmoor. We've got our HQ down there because we've got an outfitting shop down there called Base Camp. So if you're ever going to climb Everest or go across deserts, Arctic, or any sort of this, or even just trekking across the moors, you'd go there and work off. Do a lot of training in a place called Svalbard, which is the most northern community in the world. It's basically got Norway, the curvature of Norway, above a little archipelago of islands called Svalbard, and we train on them basically. I love it there. So surreal. It's on the way in, you're just flying in over these mountains that are just glaciers and snow and just Mother Nature at her best. And then when you get into the town, it's quite normal. Like you could go to a restaurant and you could sit down. It'd feel normal. You could be anywhere in the world, but outside it'd be minus 20, 30 degrees. And there's only about 2,000 people in this town, but there's about 3,500 bears sort of around it. So I just love going there. When we go out of a night time and go on little expeditions and stuff like that, yes, it is beautiful. You're surrounded by glaciers, that your aurora borealis going over the top. It's magical, but also you're very significant. You're very aware that you're quite insignificant. Like Mother Nature could just swallow you up whole, being in the middle of that.
How's your mind in that situation? Because I'm just thinking that kind of feeling of insignificance.
Yeah.
Does that relate at all to the feeling of being one with open water, being one with the darkness? Is there any sense of your mind being stiller or it being easier to be present because it's so extraordinary?
It's all of that. And it's all a bit overwhelming because it's deafening. That sounds ridiculous, but I'll describe it as a story. He was on a solo expedition out for a few weeks in the middle of nowhere, and he got resupplied one day. But the plane came in and recognised bear tracks, so that he could see tracks. Then he could see, like a day behind, these bear tracks. This bear was following him. Polar bears they'll follow prey for weeks. Any animal that actively hunts humans because they know there's not much. They can get a whiff of something, smelly two-legged person, they'll keep tracking him, and that's what this bear was doing. The pilot told him, you're being tracked by a bear, and he carried on. So the plane went, and he carried on. And that night, he sleep, and then he woke up to boom, boom, footsteps, and knowing that the bear's just thinking, crikey, it's the bear. Like I'm on my own. Boom, 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 boom. So it's quite scary to hear him and looking to see this horrible. There was nothing there. What it was, why his heartbeat had woken him up.
No
boom,
way.
Boom. He thought it was there. So that's what I mean by it's so quiet, it's deafening. And
yeah.
It's great if you can get into that state, but also it's quite just the sound of your feet walking. It's
noisy.
The boots.
Could mean that if you were in a state where you had a very busy mind, maybe it would make your thoughts echo in the silence. So it could almost be worse rather than.
There's lots to look at and do. You're always doing something. So when you do get a chance in the aurora borealis is ever, that's magical.
Yeah, I bet.
The art is magical. When you're not trying to fumble to try and take a picture of it and all that stuff. But when you can just sort of get back and take it in, that's cool.
Yeah, that's been on our list for a long time. But
yeah, it's awesome. I love it. Everything about it. But what I want to pivot a little bit with is we talked earlier about me pushing sort of limits. So what will teach me is to never step over limit. I've adapted. So get to your limit and gently push it, and it's how you sort of grow. Never step over it. But that's where I want to go with is that was quite egotistical with that stuff I still do, but the mindset. So I was doing all those things for me. What can I do? How far can I go? What can I do next? Whereas after working with Jim for the past 5 years now, it's not about that. There's no ego because on the Ice Warrior team, there's no room for ego. There's no room for bluff. It could get you killed. It could affect in a dangerous situation. So it gets it out of you. And now it's not doing something cool. I'm doing it because it's for a reason. So now it's completely purpose driven. It's got nothing to do with it. It's way bigger than me because every time I go, it's always hard on the family. It's because it's always, I'm away for long times and money and all that stuff. But really, it's purpose driven. It's not about me. It's about actually being part of something bigger. Even though I'm this little cog in this wheel of climate change, but I get to be a part of it and generally make a contribution to it. And so my whole on things is, okay, what can we do to do something better? It's all about collaboration, team. And that's where the mindset has changed. I still myself, but as a team, I'm happy to be there's different roles within the team and I'm happy to do any of them. There's no ego there. It's just like, I just want to be a good team member and help us collectively get to what we want to do. And that's my whole mindset now has completely changed.
So how was that experience of that? Because that's huge, isn't it? How has that kind of filtered out in the rest of your life and in your working life and in your family life?
I don't worry that much now, which is another thing I'm grateful for Ice Warrior. We're so highly trained to most situations, because when you're out on the ice, no one's coming for you for a long time, so you have to be able to and like, for instance, we're so high up on our first day. Some of the things we're able to treat is crazy, like femurs sticking out and pelvises and all this stuff that we can I can plug you and put you back together and keep you, stable for a certain period until someone can help you. But having that knowledge behind me and knowing it's about me anymore, it's about something bigger through life. And this is another term I've stolen from Jim, walk tall syndrome. I literally walk through life tall, not thinking about what could happen. There's no there. I'm able to deal with any sort of situation that also helps overwhelm, knowing that you're part of a being.
I was going to say, I think that's bigger. Hugely useful advice for all of us. But I'm just wondering how we can. So not everybody can take part in that kind of team, which is a very extreme, very extraordinary opportunity. But I'm just wondering how we can use that training, because what's interesting about that is you've had training to deal with emergency situations, which makes you then feel safer and more able to cope outside of that situation. But I'm also assuming that because you're, like you said, there's no room for error. There's no, so it's all about keeping the whole team safe. That must have helped you train your focus on, and you keep your attention on what's really important. And I think that is useful actually to my audience, because the really weird thing about overwhelm in day-to-day life is I believe that it's set off by our not understanding and not learning the skills to control our attention. So we are often living in our head, disconnected from our bodies, and then everything's set up to distract us. Tech, everything that's supposed to help us is set up to distract us. So we're fighting this losing battle. We're not given the skills. People say meditate, but then it becomes this thing over there for other people. You either have to go on a retreat, or you have to have a special cushion, or you have to have special training. Whereas I would argue that meditation is a natural state of humanity, but that we need to just make it a normal part of everybody's day and not make it such a big deal, not make it for other people, not make it for meditators. What is actually interesting about what you're saying is that the way we behave in everyday life is as if everything is an emergency. And that's why we get overwhelmed, because our minds are constantly reacting as if we're polar explorers. We're constantly setting off our nervous system. We get stuck in this unhelpful high alert state because we're not actually on a polar expedition. We're actually at home, and we're actually quite safe. Even if there are things we don't like, even if there are things that are disrupting our day, then they're rarely serious. I mean, sometimes they are. Okay, we've got a pandemic at the moment, but for the majority of us, we're really fortunate in that we're not sick. And yet we're living under this fear, which is why I did that episode about the news, because that is contributing to the fear and anxiety and that constant emergency state. So I'm just actually really interested. You've been trained for emergencies. We behave as if we're in one even when we don't. So actually the skills that you've learned about staying focused, about understanding, what your priorities are.
Yeah.
And also I love this thing about collaborating. And I know quite a few people have said to me this year that it's all about collaborating, which brings me absolute joy, because to me, yes, it is. Hooray. We're not competing with each other. We're all part of this puzzle of helping each other out. I have stuff that could help you. You have stuff that could help me. So let's work together and help lots of other people, because we're so much more than the sum of just us coming together, which is the point of this podcast and having you here. How can we help everybody who listens and get them to tell other people? And actually, I'd really like to use what you've just said. How can we distill what you've learned about being trained for an emergency to help people who are getting stuck in a state of overwhelm, even when they're not in an emergency?
that we can't control much in this world other than we react to things. And once you get to that state of, well, you know, if something's going to happen, it's going to happen anyway. And if it's definitely happening, there's no point worrying about it, because then you worry. If you worry about something that's going to happen anyway, you just get affected by it twice. Is what I'm saying. Is I just things as they happen, because it's the only thing we can control is how we react to things. I don't know if that's helpful.
Really interesting though, because there's two things going on there I want to pick up on. So there's the idea that we can't control things, so therefore there's no point worrying before and then when it happens, because you get double trouble.
Yeah.
But there's also what you said earlier about what I would, the manifesting idea that you get more of what you focus on.
Yeah.
So in a way, I guess if we combine those, we'd get, if you keep worrying about trying to control the things you can't control, you just get more of that by definition, because that's what you're placing your attention on. Whereas what I do to counteract that is this thing of always expect the unexpectedly lovely, because then you'll get more of that. So it's not that we're trying to control what's happening, but we can control both where we place our attention, and then when the stuff happens, just controlling our reaction to that. So, and I guess
that's all we can control.
That
can't
is
control the weather, can't control anything. It's okay, great, it's raining, great, it's sunny. It's just what it is.
It's just weather.
Yeah.
Which reminds me, on our yoga teach training with the Daizan Roshi, the Zen master, he used to ask us each day to tell us a weather forecast for our minds. So you just say, stormy, bit overcast. Oh, it's really sunny today. And that was really nice, because it gets you observing your mind, but then observing it with like a pictorial description, rather than getting into a judgmental, I ought not to be feeling miserable, loop.
But if you described it as a rainy day, was that your way of saying it was negative, or was it just an observation?
I don't know. It would depend on the person.
Right.
So it's like you say, it's just weather.
Yeah.
So I guess the practice is to treat it all just as weather. There's sometimes rain, there's sometimes sun. But it's like when there's lots of rain, sometimes that's good because you want the rain, because you want your beans watered. And sometimes you don't want sun because you've got to stay inside doing some tech stuff all day.
Yeah.
So whether somebody was describing it as rainy being negative would be very personal to them. And I guess the only way we would know in the group would be if we picked up on their energy or emotional state.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know really. Maybe sometimes, I guess the closest to negative might be perceived as it feels stormy. But even that's quite one step back from I am in a state of storminess, isn't it? And I think that stepping back and observing, that's the power, because it gives you the space.
Third person view, you're just sort of step outside yourself, observe what's actually going on, and not react to it. It's just happening. Where we learn the tools and to try and to deal with it and see fit at the time.
Yeah.
I try and describe stuff now as weather patterns.
You're going to try doing it?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, it's fun. I think it'd be good thing to teach kids, actually. Just to get children identifying, noticing how they're feeling, but in a more kind of gentle way, which kind of brings me into, please, can you tell us about Growing Heroes? Because I really do want to know, and I just think that it's such a, what you were talking about, this is such a non-egotistical thing, because it's completely of service. You didn't have any reason whatsoever to spend all this time building a membership to support homeschoolers. That is completely of service. And I really feel that there are lots of people who need to know about it, because I know so many parents who are stressed at the moment. And please tell us about it.
Okay. Absolutely. So me and my wife Kate, we have two daughters, and 7 and 9, and we've been homeschooling them since they were, day dot. So like every parent does for the first few years, but we just carried that on. And so when lockdown happened, our lives didn't change an awful lot, other than we wasn't going to so many groups anymore. Some of the outside ones, but none of the inside ones, and we're still just doing our own thing. They call it homeschooling. I don't know why, because we're never at home usually, but anyway. So our lives didn't really get affected, but I was seeing like friends and people that I bumped into and just having such a really hard time with homeschooling their child, which I found was odd because I'm only used to spending a lot of time with my girls. So I did find it a bit odd, but I understood it when you're used to sort of doing your own thing, and then all of a sudden you've got this other person around you all day that needs you to do certain things that perhaps you don't know or you think you don't know how to do. I speak to a lot of people about homeschooling, and they say, "Oh, I can never do that. I'm not clever enough." Well, I'm definitely no Einstein, but what I do know, I know, and what I don't know, I find someone else that knows. And so basically, when the lockdown happened, I was seeing all these people that was in despair, and I knew a lot of teachers that wasn't working, and I just thought, well, there's got to be something here, right? I mean, I am a business owner, so part of being a business owner is, finding problems or getting over them, and you kind of think outside the box. So I suppose being me being, there's got to be something here. Children that aren't being schooled, and I know teachers that aren't teaching. How do you put them together in a safe environment, a cool place? And that's when I thought, well, online, one teacher reached many students, many children. Just sticking with the skill set that I have already, being primary school aged, we open up a website called Growing Heroes. That we are growing little heroes, aren't we? They are a generation of little heroes. So to them now is going to help them going forward. Yeah, we started collating some teachers that we've worked with in the past for our own children, and their methods of how we do it. Just collated it all onto this website. So in my head, I was at this place where everyone has access to safe. The content's got to be really engaging, because if you've never done homeschooling and then suddenly you've got your child in front of you, I have to block out 9 to 3 every day, and they have to stand and face forward and all that sort of school against the school system. I'm not going to go on any sort of rant or any, if it has a purpose for some. It's not for all, but it's for some. But if you're a parent, your child's not going to sit there for an hour and look at a maths book. And I know you're a maths teacher, but like it just doesn't work at home. That dynamics just doesn't work.
I also don't think it needs to, because if you actually look at a maths lesson, that's not what's going on anyway. So if you actually look at the amount of purposeful, practice going on, 20 minutes of really focused practice is pretty
exactly
exhausting
that,
and enough anyway. In fact, 10 minutes when you've got it at just that edge where it's learning, so it's outside of the comfort zone, but they feel safe, can do like a month of just rocking up at school and being bored. So
emotions.
I think it's really important to get out of that idea that kids have to be sat from 9 till 3 in this passive thing, because when the pressure on parents to replicate that at home is really creating a lot of issues right now for a lot of parents, a lot of children. And it's rubbish, it's unnecessary, it's unhelpful, and it's completely and utterly pointless. It's not achieving anything other than pretending that we can carry on as normal. So I really like this idea, because even if parents, for most parents, they're going to just be really grateful when the school's open and they just want to get through. But even for those parents, your website could give them a way to support their kids and to help them really learn something just for now. So I just think it's brilliant. I really love the idea of it. I love the name of it, because it really values children and sees the potential in them, rather than, I don't want to get into a big education rant, because that's not where I choose to place my energy. But the idea of growing heroes rather than processing children through a school system which is suitable for some but not for all. I just think that's really refreshing, and I'm really grateful for the parents I know who are just going to be really glad that you could be bothered to collate everything in a way, because you didn't have to do it. You're already homeschooling. So I just think it's really generous and it's really nice. And can you tell us, is the website just, if they Googled Growing Heroes, would they find it?
I've Heroes spelled. Growing Hero is HEOS.com. You go on the website, it tells you about it. You search any sort of social media, you'll find lots about what we're up to and also the backstory. It's very purpose driven, like you said. We didn't have to do it. It's not about us, it's about them.
Yeah.
And the teachers we got on board are very much of the same caliber as well. It's about teaching. They love to teach, and you see some of the energy of these teachers, and it's so insatiable. It's great. And yeah, we've just captured it all on this membership. So have a look at the site. I mean, if it's a bit of you, fantastic. If it's not, pass it on to someone that you feel may benefit from it. I understand what it's like to own a business and children around and try and get on with work and have children around, get it. And like this software where every there's subjects and every day a new lesson is uploaded, like a back catalogue of lessons coming through other engaging ways. It's kind of if you need to get on with some work, the children in the same hand, they're engaging, they're having fun, but if you can find the time to learn with them, it's got that on there as well.
Yeah, I really like that. So you've got the stuff that will support you in allowing you to get on and run your business or work. And then you've also got the stuff, because it's really nice actually to I know it doesn't feel like it to a lot of parents, but the time when your children are at home with you and want to engage with you is actually quite small. And the privilege of spending time with them, there's an opportunity to see that as a privilege and to use these resources to change your relationship with them so that it's not all just getting through.
Honestly, it's magical. That's why we love homeschool way of life, because every day I'm learning. I know every day is a school day for everyone, but when the girls are learning so much with them as well, it's just rather than I touch a little bit like the school, you may learn something and then move on to the next thing. Where if we find something we like, we dig deep on it, and we really go to town on it. And that's I'm trying to capture that magic. Or we've tried to capture that magic that we get from homeschooling into Growing Heroes. So yes, you can plonk them in front of it, and trust me, they'll stay there and be engaged, because the site's very 5 or 11. It's engaging for everyone and you can learn as well. That's the magic. If you want to be involved in some of these lessons, like the science lessons or the cooking or the singing is hilarious. And I will warn you, the songs will get stuck in your head. Sing.
Don't.
It's great. It's so fun just to get involved as a family and learn something new and try something different. It's great. I love it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. That's just, this has been an extraordinary conversation. So thank you so much, Curtis, for coming on.
Thank me on. After seeing the list of people, was I meant to be? If your listeners can get some good golden nuggets out of what we said, then that's great. That's fantastic. Happy to be here.
I hope you're enjoying this podcast and finding it helpful. If you'd like to know more about how I work as a body mindfulness teacher and coach, you can go to my website, www.heidimark.co.uk, or you can follow me in the usual places, Facebook, Instagram, and more recently, a YouTube channel. You can also book, for a limited amount of time, a free 30-minute coaching call by going to calendly.com/Heidi-ease.